My brothers and sisters in Christ, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers here. And I just want to share with you some very exciting news. This fall, I'm going back on pilgrimage. Father Thomas Reagan and I will be leading the Footsteps of Paul pilgrimage to Greece from October 20th through the 31st, with a special extension to Rome from October 31st to November 3rd. All the information, you go to my website, deaconharold.com, and click on the pilgrimage link, and you will get all the information for all the pilgrimages I have coming up. But for this one, we're going to be doing 13 days in Greece. I'm so excited to be traveling again after being sidelined for so long because of the COVID-19 pandemic. All the information is right here. You can see the pricing for the pilgrimage and what the pilgrimage includes. It's going to be a wonderful time, especially now, as we're walking through the Acts of the Apostles, to actually be in the places where Paul taught and walked and preached the gospel to those first Christians. And so I'm inviting you to join us again. The pilgrimage to Greece, all the information is right here. All you have to do is go to my website, deaconharold.com, and just click here on pilgrimages, and you can see my pilgrimage page right here with information about and my personal invitation, inviting you to travel with me on pilgrimage, as well as an article what it's like to travel with me on pilgrimage, some great photos, an interview with my pilgrimage coordinator, Ellen Holmes Steve LeBlanc, about the contemplative pilgrimage experience. And right here, you can see all the pilgrimages that I have coming up, including the one to Greece with Father Thomas Reagan. And all you got to do is just click on this button to sign up right here. I look forward to being back on pilgrimage with you, and I hope you're able to join us. Until then, please be assured of my prayers, my friends. Take care, and may God bless you always.
Welcome to Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers Walk by Faith Wednesday webinar, where Deacon Harold and guests explore our Catholic faith through passionate discussion. Get ready as Deacon Harold and his diverse guests bring an array of knowledge and life to Catholic teaching. You are watching Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers Walk by Faith Wednesday webinar.
All right, well, good afternoon. As you said, I'm Deacon Harold. I am a deacon in the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon, all right? I was originally born in Barbados in the West Indies. Anybody know where Barbados is? Oh, you know where it is? Where? That's what I just said, bro. But do you know where in the West Indies? Yeah. Yes, it's not too far off the coast of Venezuela, so it's close to South America. So I didn't become a citizen in the United States until I was 17 years old. I'm the first person in my family also ever to go to college. And now I was a police officer for 23 years, a police chief for 11 years, and now I speak and write about Jesus. I travel all over the world. Before COVID, about 250,000 miles a year. I've been to 19 different countries. I have 4 books. My 5th book is coming out in the fall. And so I do speak at schools all over the place. I'm thrilled to be talking to you today. I only have a half an hour of your time, so I just want to talk about something I think is pretty important. That's dignity and respect for the human person. And I want to start off by going to the scriptures. You know, there's a lot of amazing young people in the scriptures that we often don't think about. For example, there's Solomon, right? David's son. David is considered the greatest king in the history of Israel. He's so great that one of Jesus' titles is Son of David. His son Solomon was a teenager when he became the king of Israel. Mary, the great saint in the history of our church was a teenager when she became the mother of God. And the prophet Samuel was also a teenager. Now we see here in 1 Samuel chapter 16 that the first king of Israel is Saul. And God is not happy with Saul because Saul is not doing what God wants him to do. So God sends the prophet Samuel to the house of Jesse, because the house of Jesse is where the new king is going to come from. So Samuel has Jesse line up his sons. He goes, line up your sons. Now he has 8 sons, but he only lines up 7 of them. A guy named Eliab, Abinadab, his brother Shammah, 4 others. Anybody remember what brother they left out? What brother was not included in those original 7? David. Why? Because he was the youngest. He's only a teenager. If they're talking about making someone a new king, that's man stuff, right? And so David was outside. He was a shepherd of the sheep. And so the sons are all lined up. Samuel goes to the first son, Eliab. Now, the Bible doesn't describe Eliab, but he's probably a tall, handsome, good-looking guy. And Samuel says to himself, this guy looks like a king. So he goes to pour the oil of anointing on his head. God says, no, not him. Samuel's confused. He's like, I'm in the right house. There's Jesse. I got the oil. Here are the sons. What's the problem? Now here's what God says to Samuel. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance. The Lord looks on the heart. Now you see the problem. The problem is that Samuel was looking at Eliab, and just by the way he looked on the outside, he thought he was a king. But God said, no, it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. Doesn't matter how tall you are, how short you are, how black or white, Hispanic or Asian. Doesn't matter what you look like. What God cares about is what kind of person you are on the inside. What is in your heart. And for the Israelites, the word for heart is leb. And it just doesn't mean an organ that pumps blood through your body. The heart was the place where your desire for God lives inside of you. Because that's where God could touch you and move you and change your life, is in your heart. That's what God wanted Samuel to look at. Not the outside, but the inside. Think of it like this. This is the first time I've been speaking for a while because of COVID, and I had to stay home. But now I get to speak in front of people again. And I started my little tour in Pittsburgh about 2 weeks ago. So after this event in Pittsburgh, this guy's probably 92 years old, came up to me, and he has a little cane and everything, and we just had a conversation. Said, hey, what did you do for a living? When you were still working and stuff. He goes, I was a miner. I said, you worked in the mines? He goes, yeah. I said, what'd you mine for? He said, gold. I said, cool. So I know now that when they mine things out of the ground, they use all these fancy machines and computers that extract all of the dirt and all of the impurities out of the gold, so the gold is pure. I said, but you had to do it by hand. You had to do it without the machines. How did you know when the gold was pure? He said, when you can see your reflection in the gold, then you knew the gold was ready, that the gold was pure. So I ask you, what does God see when he looks at you. Like that piece of gold, can he see his reflection in your heart when he looks at you? When you look at someone else, do you see God's reflection in their heart when you look at them? Or do you just make the mistake that Samuel made? You look on the outside. Huh? You know, why do I bring this up? Because sometimes, for example, might take myself. Sometimes people look at me and they get scared. Why? I'll give you an example. I was at a parish like this, not here, but I was at a parish. And it was the last night of the mission, and usually I have a lot of products and books and things that I sell. And I was packing that stuff up, and I was bringing it out to put it in my car, because at this particular mission, I had a rental car because it was so far from the airport, so I rented a car. So I'm loading the stuff into the car, and I guess someone thought that I was trying to steal from the church, so they called the police. Even though they had posters on the door with my face on it, that I was there for the mission, someone, I don't know, a neighbor or something thought, and so the police came and, and asked what I was doing. I mean, why? Why? Like, for example, I'm the first person in my family to go to Notre Dame. I got an academic scholarship. But someone came up to me and said, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame. What position did you play?" They just assumed I played football. When the fact is, I literally have never played football in my life. Never. If you put football pads on the floor, I literally would have no idea what to do with them. I got in because I had 1290 SAT score. I graduated top 10 in my class. And I worked really hard. Because as a single mom, I saw how much my mother sacrificed so we could have a better life than she did. But they don't see that. And when people don't see you, and they just see a caricature of you, it hurts. It hurts. But we live in a culture that likes to dehumanize people. What do I mean by that? Make people less than human. I'll give you a simple example. Like, what's your name? Davis is your first name? Oh, what's your last name? Okay, I'll just call you Davis, all right? Now stand up for a second. Now, I got to stay over here because I don't give you cooties or whatever, right? So, say me and you are really angry with each other, we're going to fight, okay? Now, before we throw down, what are we going to say to each other? What are things we would say to each other back and forth? Something mean, right? Like, what would we do? Call each other really insulting names, right? Like, I would not go up to you and say, "Davis, you are made in the image and likeness of God. I see God in your heart," and then punch you in the face. Is that going to happen? No, right? We're going to call each other, "You are a piece of this. Your mother is this." We're going to call each other. Why? Because we're dehumanizing each other. See? Because right now, I can't hurt you because I see you as a person. So what we have to do is use that kind of language and use that anger to dehumanize each other, so that when we finally hit each other, I can hurt you or you can hurt me because I no longer see you as a person in my mind. Right? That's how it happens. Right? Sorry, thank you. For example, another example, when someone is sick and in a coma, what do we call that person? Vegetable. That sound human to you? See, this is what we do in our culture. But this has been going on for a long time. For example, in 1857, there was a Supreme Court of the United States decision called Dred Scott versus John F. Sanford. That Supreme Court decision said that black people were property and not human beings. Why? Because they were slaves. And if they saw the slave as a human being, then you couldn't enslave them. So you have to say that they're not human, because if you don't see them as human, you can now enslave them. Let me just read you a little bit of the Supreme Court. It was Justice Blackmun who was the, Chief Justice Taney, who was the majority opinion. He wrote this. Slaves had for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. Be a slave for his benefit. A perpetual barrier, that means a barrier that cannot be pushed down or moved, was intended to be erected between the white race and the one that was reduced to slavery, and that blacks were looked upon so far below the scale of created beings that they were never thought of or spoken of except as property. Now you compare that with the constant teaching of the Catholic faith that taught outright that slavery was immoral and wrong. I mean, I got a whole list of popes here, from Pope Adrian I, Eugene IV, Gregory XIV, Pius VII, many, many others, blatantly said that slavery was literally from the devil and it was evil. And then in 1973, Supreme Court in the United States said, a baby in the womb is not a person, it's a blob of tissue. Again, of course they have to say that, because when you dehumanize someone, now you can kill them because you no longer see them as human. And in this culture today, all these things you hear about on the news, they look you in the face and they lie to you every single day. Because instead of being made in God's image and likeness, this culture is trying to be made in God, trying to make God into its own image and likeness. And that's why, at a lower level, a lot of kids bully. Now, why do kids bully other kids? I have 3 reasons that I think kids bully each other. Number 1, because they're angry. They're probably getting abused or beaten at home, and they can't do anything to stop it. And so the way they deal with it is they come to school, they take it out on somebody who's weaker than them. So they're mirroring what's happening to them at home. They're being hurt by someone that was stronger than them, and they feel helpless to stop it. So now they have to make some other kid at school who's weaker than them that can't stop it either. So they do it out of a sense of anger. Out of a sense of fear, because we fear what we don't understand. So if a kid comes to your school who's not Native American Indian, but Indian from India, and the kid smells a little different, or the kid wears weird clothes. So instead of trying to understand this person and their culture, we make fun of them. We ridicule them because we fear what we don't understand. Then finally, I think some kids have such low self-esteem and such a low sense of self-worth that they want to make everybody else around them feel the same way. And the way you're doing it now, in this culture, is yes, the bullying in the school, yes, but also online. 57% of cyberbullying is done by girls. 57% of bullying online is done by girls. Now,
When I was a police chief, I worked on a college campus for 11 years. I was a police chief on the college campus. And I saw firsthand the results of girls bullying each other. They would start cutting themselves. Some girls tried to commit suicide. So if you think it's funny to post things about another girl in your class because maybe she doesn't have as much money as your family has, maybe she's not as cute as you, maybe she doesn't have the same clothes you have, you better think deeply and seriously about what you post. Because you will never know how that affects another person. But how do we begin to overcome this? We need to see the image and likeness of God in the person standing in front of us. So let me just give a little breakdown for you. You've all heard that before, right? We're made in the image and likeness of God. You've all heard that, right? From the book of Genesis chapter 1. But what does that actually mean? The word image is a masculine noun in Hebrew, selem. And selem literally means a shadow that's the outline or representation of the original. So I'm standing in the light and I'm casting a shadow. Is the shadow me? No, it's the image. It's the outline, right? It's the shadow, image, outline, reflection of me. But yet if I move, the shadow moves. So what does that mean spiritually? Are we God? Yeah, that should be a very emphatic no, right? Of course we're not God. But as Peter, the first pope, says in his second letter, chapter 1, verse 4, that we are partakers in the divine nature. That means we share in God's life. St. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, his first letter, chapter 6, verse 19, says that our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit that we have within us from God. So we're not God, but we have God's image, God's outline, God's shadow, if you will, imprinted onto our souls. So what does that mean spiritually? You know, God's plan before sin came into the world and the tree and all that, and they ate the fruit from the tree and all that, before that, we were supposed to reflect God's life in us. So just like I move and the shadow moves, when we speak, we're supposed to be reflecting the words of God. When we think, we're supposed to be reflecting the mind of God. And when we love, we're supposed to be reflecting the heart of God. That's what it means to be made in the image of God. What about likeness? Demuth. It's a feminine noun in Hebrew, which means similar. Well, what does that mean, similar? Spiritually. All right, say someone wanted to create a statue of me, right? You put the statue of me on one side, and you take my son Benjamin, and you put Ben on the other side of me. Now, you would say they are both in my likeness because they both look like me. In fact, the statue looks more like me than my son. But what does my son have that the statue doesn't have? Life, in essence, a nature, a being. So my stuff and God's stuff is in my son. So even though the statue looks more like me, my son is much more in my likeness. Does that make sense? That's how we're supposed to understand, and that's how we're supposed to see each other. You know who did this really well? Maybe you guys are too young to remember. You remember Mother Teresa? St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa? You know, I am not a big TV watcher. I rarely ever watch television. But when she was being made a saint by the Catholic Church, I wanted to see, what are the other people saying about Mother Teresa? So I watched this little show by the BBC, which is the British Broadcast Network, and they had a show from the 1990s that showed this reporter following Mother Teresa around and her nuns for about half a day. And so they showed in the morning, the nuns got up and they went to Mass and they ate breakfast and did an hour of adoration. Then they went out into the streets. And hundreds of people are walking up and down the streets of Calcutta. And then you see people on the side of the road like garbage, literally like garbage at the side of the road. And you see the nuns going in there and picking up these people. Some of them have leprosy, where your fingers and limbs fall off. Some of these people have AIDS. Some people have pleurisy and other just devastating diseases. Now, these people are going to die because Mother Teresa and her nuns were not nurses. They're not going to nurse anybody back to health. But they brought these people back to the hospice because if they're going to die, at least they don't have to die in their own urine. At least they don't have to die alone and scared. At least they're going to die knowing that somebody loved them, that somebody cared for them, that somebody showed them God's love for the brief time that they have left on earth. That's what I saw. The reporter, the more the morning went on, the more disgusted he got. I mean, when he saw the people and the smell and the bodies, and he finally said to Mother Teresa, "How could you stand to be around people that look like that?" And Mother Teresa looked at him and said, "Is that what they look like?" Why? Because when she saw someone, she saw Jesus. And that's the lesson for us. When we look at someone, we need to see what God sees when he looks at that person. And so we have to foster within us a love of God so that we can see and view people in that way. And we have to remove things from our lives that don't allow us to see people that way. Okay? Now, how many of you have phones? Oh, man. When I was a kid, there's no internet, there's no cell phones. Like, boy, you lived in the Stone Ages, huh? Right? No, if my mother wanted to call us, she didn't text. She stuck her head out the window and started yelling. That's how she got our attention, all right? But now with your phone, so you'll understand this true life thing here. Now I'm going to end, and then if you want to ask a couple questions before you have to go. So when I was a police chief, this gal, she's a junior, 20 years old, came into my office and said that another guy in her class was sending inappropriate pictures of himself to her. And I said, "Oh, let me see the pictures." And she goes, "Well, they disappeared because they sent them via Snapchat." Now, I did not know how Snapchat worked. I didn't even know what Snapchat was. And so I said, "Well, what do you mean the pictures disappear? If I take a picture on my phone, the picture stays there until I delete it." "Well, not with this. With this, you can see it and then the picture disappears." I'm like, "Well, okay." So then I brought the young man in later. I said, "Do you know such and such student?" "Yes." "Well, she came in here and said that you were sending inappropriate pictures of yourself to her." And he put his head down like this. He said, "No. Let me tell you what's going on." He said, "I am a believer in Jesus, and I am not going to engage in any kind of sexual activity until I get married with my wife. These girls in my class think that's funny. So they're having a contest to see who can get me to break my vows before I get married. I'm not sending pictures to them, they're sending pictures to me." "Really? Huh. Let me see the pictures." "I can't. They disappeared." So now what do I do? She's saying this. He's saying something completely opposite. There's no evidence. there's no pictures. So here's what I did. I went back to the young lady. I said, let me understand what you want to do here. Do you want to file criminal charges? Or do you just want to go through the university's internal discipline system? She goes, I want to file criminal charges. Which is exactly what I wanted to hear. Because when I filed those charges, what did that allow me to do? Anybody, parents or cops here? Detective? Yes. No, not put him in jail. No. There's no crime committed yet, right? That allowed me to get a subpoena, not for their phones. I don't care about their phones. I got a subpoena for Snapchat's servers. So it took 2 weeks, but I got the information that I needed. So I bring the young lady back in. I'm sitting here at my desk. There's a folder sitting right in front of me, and she's on the other side. I say, I'm just about finished my investigation, but you should know this, that when I brought the young man in here, he was saying that you weren't sending pictures, that he wasn't sending pictures to you, that you were sending pictures to him. He said that! He's a liar! He's just trying to get out of trouble. I said, you know what? I thought the exact same thing until I saw this. And I opened up that folder and I slid a picture of her naked in front of her. She was white, she turned red. She said, where'd you get that? I said, the same place I got this one. And this one. And this one. I just started sliding pictures in front of her. And guess what the pictures had on them that I got from Snapchat? Date, time, IP address from her phone to his phone. So he told the truth. There was not one picture from his phone to her phone. And there were some other girls too, but I don't know who they are because it doesn't have the girl's name, it's just the IP address. So I said, who are these other girls? Well, I'm not going to rat out on my friends. Really? So we threw her out of school. We threw her out of school. So you need to think, look, everything you post, all your pictures, even though you delete it, it's there forever. It never goes away. Ever. So you need to think deeply and seriously about everything you're posting on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is you're using. Because it stays there and doesn't go away, even though you delete it. You might delete your account and it's still there. Sometimes you think things are funny. Someone just sent me, because I don't do that TikTok or whatever that stuff, but someone sent me, because I was a cop, something posted on TikTok, next week, or there's a day next week, National Rape Day. What kind of sick person would come up with something like that? Oh, but a lot of people think it's funny. It's not funny. It's not funny. But see, here's the best part, my friends. We are all believers in Jesus. And Jesus gave his life so that we can live. And we can be the examples to this culture out there of how to live, seeing the dignity of the human person standing in front of us. We can be the examples. We can be the witnesses. We can be the ones to defeat all the hatred that's happening in our culture right now. And it starts with you. It starts when you make the decision, I will not think or act like my so-called friends. I refuse to post things that strip someone of their dignity and humanity. I will be the first one to go to that new kid in my class and make them feel welcome. God has given us everything that we need to see beyond what this culture is only concerned about itself. But Christ calls us to make a gift of ourselves. Why? It's when you give yourself away in love that you truly find yourself in God. And that's what you do to live a life of happiness, of joy, of real joy. Has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with what you do for a living. That has nothing to do with it. It's all about how I'm uniting my life to Christ's life. How am I using the gifts and the talents that he's given me to glorify God? That's what it's all about. And so, my friends, I end with the words of the prophet Samuel. When Samuel was called, we talked about Samuel going to the house of Jesse, but when Samuel was first called to be a prophet, he was not much older than you. He was in the temple with the priest Eli. And the Lord called him while he was sleeping. Samuel! Samuel woke up because he thought Eli was calling him. So he goes to Eli. Yes, you called me. He goes, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. Oh, okay. He goes back to sleep. Samuel! He gets up, goes back to Eli again. You called me. See, Samuel didn't recognize the voice of God calling him. So Eli realized, wait a minute. The Lord is calling the boy. So he said, next time the Lord calls you, this is how you're supposed to respond. And I leave this with you. When you're trying to listen to God's voice in your life, because you got some decisions to make. Where are you going to go to high school? And then after that, where are you going to go to college? What career? What has God put in my path? Is this the person I'm supposed to marry, spend the rest of my life with? Am I called to be a priest or not? You got some big decisions to make. You make those decisions with God. So if you hear the voice of the Lord calling you, respond the way Samuel did. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Amen. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for watching Deacon Harold's Walk by Faith Wednesday webinar. Tune in next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for more.